Hello. Welcome to Community Matters. My name is Becky Steinbrunner, and I am honored to be your host here for the next 2 hours. I want to thank you for listening in and supporting Santa Cruz Voice. It is our local platform for news and many issues in our communities. I also want to take a moment to thank Satellite Workplaces and Digital Media Studio here at 325 Soquel Avenue in Santa Cruz for letting us be here in this beautiful, very clean, quiet, and secure place. It is a wonderful place, and if you're looking for a remote workplace that is clean, quiet, and very secure, I urge you to check out Satellite Workplaces and Digital Media Studio. It is available for you to rent by the hour, by the day, by the week, whatever. Either just a work desk. There are small meeting rooms where if you do work at home but you need a secure private place for meetings with your clients and you don't want to do it at your kitchen table, you can come to Satellite Workplaces and Digital Media Center here at 325 Soquel Avenue in Santa Cruz. They have places like that available to you for a time that will fit your needs and your budget. You can also get your mail delivered here, so it's a good place. Come check it out. It is located in the mint green masonry building between Ocean Street in Santa Cruz and the beautiful San Lorenzo River. As I said, I am Becky Steinbrunner. I'm honored to be your host here today for the next 2 hours. We have a good program for you, and I hope you'll call in and participate, especially in the first hour when I will be giving an update on what is happening in Santa Cruz County and a little bit beyond regarding the battery energy storage systems known as BESS acronym. These are the lithium storage places in certainly growing in California. I hope we all are aware of the horrible toxic incident that happened at Moss Landing in January, recurring in February at the old Moss Landing power plant, where it is the largest battery energy storage plant in the world. And none of us knew that, I'll bet, until a lot of it went up in flames in January. What was in those flames and what was in the cloud of smoke and ash that went out beyond, that is still being uncovered, and I urge you all to take a look at the Never Again Moss Landing site, neveragainmosslanding.org. That is a grassroots group that came together quickly after that horrible tragedy because nobody else was. The federal officials that were supposed to be there were not, or very, very silent. The county was steamed in a state of chaos, and although evacuated residents told them it was safe to go home after 24 hours. How could they do that? Anyway, we have something cooking, so to speak, here in Santa Cruz County too, with a draft ordinance our county supervisors may be looking at and approving as soon as next month. It had been postponed in August by the board led by Supervisor Justin Cummings for a year in order to gather more information about what happened at Moss Landing and to assist in crafting our county's ordinance, what we would require of such installations. But then the one of the 3 sites in Santa Cruz County that have already been identified and approved in concept, that is at 19 Minto Rd in Watsonville, known as the Seahawk Energy Storage facility, is in permit process. That developer started leaking things to the press and getting everybody agitated that, oh no, we will lose local control because you will lose local control because we're going to go to the state. Grr. Then that is possible for them to do. Well, we need to think about that if it really is such a bad thing. I'm coming around to the idea that it could be a good thing. And I'll talk about that a bit in my first hour, and I urge you to call in if you have thoughts or information about it. The number to call is 831-265-5050. Call in. Or if you have other thoughts on the issue of battery storage, lithium technology, non-lithium technology. You know, it does exist. We're not being really given a lot of information about that, and certainly our county elected leaders have rejected any requests to hold town hall meetings here in their districts to even talk about this issue, and that has to be addressed. That certainly has to be addressed. Just to interject here a bit, something in the news today, we will be having a new county administrative officer coming in the beginning of the year. Her name is Nicole Coburn. It is absolutely no surprise to me that she was rubber stamped as the new CAO to replace Carlos Palacios, who replaced Susan Moriello in this same charade of hand-picking and pretending to have a nationwide search. It's all a charade and has cost the taxpayers a lot of money in performing that charade. I will just say that at this time, relating to the battery energy, maybe we will have a change in at least publicly what the policy pushers are saying and doing, but there is so much, people, there is so much going on behind the scenes in this battery energy realm in our county. Big money, and I'm very concerned. I have to scratch my head when the first day of the selection process of our new CAO, I went to this special meeting held in the very luxurious Hotel Paradox, not at the 701 Ocean Building that the people own, where it would not have cost. They went next door to a lavish hotel for this. And who did I see in the audience that was part of the interview panel? Mr. Rob Shaw, the CEO of Central Coast Community Energy, 3CE. He was on the panel to help decide who would be winnowed out to be selected as the second day's interview process. Two people were interviewed that day, Nicole Coburn, of course, being one. But why was the head of 3CE there making that decision? Why was the head of the County Office of Education there? Why was the head of Second Harvest Food Bank there? And yet the people were shut out. It was closed session. But there were all those people at the table helping to make the decision. That can be a topic for another day, but the point of my bringing it up now is that it did happen. How it happened, I believe there were a lot of violations of the Brown Act and how it was not noticed to the public, but that there will be a changing of the guard at the CAO's desk. Let me tell you, folks, it is not the Board of Supervisors that runs this county. It is the CAO, the County Administrative Officer. They hold the purse strings and they wield the power. So just know that. It is how it is, and I have seen it in my years of observing many Board of Supervisor meetings and doing Public Records Act requests. So I will share some of that with you here in a little moment about the battery energy storage situation. So locally, it was there were articles leaked out in some of the media that the developers of the Seahawk Energy project at 90 Minto Road in Watsonville, they were going to go to the state. So you take that, and we're going to cut you out of the project. Well, I have come around. I've always felt that local jurisdiction was best, but in this case, I am thinking that it would be better for us to have them go through this opt-in certification with the California Energy Commission. And here's why. Santa Cruz County wants this money for this project, and there are people in Santa Cruz County leadership, including the CAO, Mr. Palacios, including 5th District Supervisor Monica Martinez, who sit on the boards of Central Coast Community Energy, 3CE. Now, 3CE has 94% of the accounts of power customers in the county. When they came into being, you had to actively say no to their assumption of your account, or it was just automatic. That's how they've gotten 94% of all of the accounts. You can opt out, and I encourage you to do so. And I do that because they are actively, that board, that agency, 3CE, is actively financially supporting lithium battery storage in our county and in Monterey County. In fact, 3CE has approved last November a multi-million-dollar power purchase agreement with the Clearway LLC and Holman BESS, that's that Battery Energy Storage System LLC, for a large lithium-ion battery storage facility, new one, at Moss Landing. 3CE is supporting that. They are also quietly supporting the Seahawk project. And I have learned about that through some public information requests. So I'm urging people to opt out. I'm urging people to go to the 3CE board meetings. You can find them on their website. They have a number of different boards. Mr. Palacios, the Santa Cruz County CAO, sits on the operations board. Supervisor from the 5th District, Monica Martinez, sits on the policy board. And we have different people who sit on the 3CE Community Advisory Committee, one of whom is Miss Jenny Johnson, who is the former analyst for former 5th District County Supervisor Bruce McPherson, and was the real mover and shaker in organizing the initial formation of Monterey Bay Community Power, which was expanded to go down all the way down to Ventura County and changed its name to Central Coast Community Energy, 3CE. She is a big player, and she sits on this Community Energy Advisory Committee. The head of that committee is a man named Chris Damhorst. Chris Damhorst chairs the county's Commission on the Environment, which has become, amazingly, the source of educational material for the public and for the county supervisors on the issue of battery energy storage systems and projects. Isn't that interesting? But I will tell you that Mr. Damhorst actively has excluded people from alternative battery companies that wanted to be able to speak, wanted to be able to give presentations, non-lithium alternatives to the lithium, very dangerous, flammable, explosive technology. They were not allowed. They were not allowed. Even when one of the hand-picked lobbyists that Mr. Damhorst picked had to cancel, he did not allow any of these people who had asked to be on and to speak. He did not allow them. He was asked, and this is a travesty. He single-handedly wrote the summary of all three of those workshops that was supposed to be the source of information for the public. And again, because none of the county supervisors will do so, there are no reports publicly to the Board of Supervisors meetings. Nothing. And that's why I continue to talk about this here every week, because this is very important to our community's safety, our public health, our environmental health, and it's all being kept quiet. There are things going on behind closed doors, and people, we've got to get involved. So I'm going to talk with you about that. If you have any thoughts, if you have any information, please call in 831-265-5050. So I want to, if hearing this opt-in certification with the California Energy Commission is new to you, let me just describe a little bit about that process and why I think it could be actually the better course of action for our county. Prior to June 30th of 2022 and the signing of AB 205, the California Energy Commission was limited to thermal power plants 50 megawatts or larger. But the opt-in certification became available when AB 205 was passed in 2022, and that became a new streamlined process for project reviews and decision making. The California Energy Commission now becomes the lead agency under the California Environmental Quality Act, and here's the piece, is required to prepare an environmental impact report for any facility that elects to opt in to the CEC, California Energy Commission's jurisdiction. They are required to do a full environmental impact report. The piece that initially had me worried is that I have seen a lot of environmental impact reports done, EIRs they are known as, and I never felt like they really did anything other than spend a lot of time, spend a lot of money, but it does require, under the law, that there are public hearings, there are public meetings, and they have to be held in the area where the project is located. So that is good. The county of Santa Cruz may not require New Leaf Energy, the developer of the Seahawk energy storage project at 90 Minto Road. They may not make them do that. And in Public Records Act requests, I have seen that the developer is vigorously lobbying them and even making claims that they won't have to do it beyond just a simple, what's called a scoping session, just to kind of take a look, a cursory look at what might be needed, and just say negative declaration, nothing to see here, no significant impacts. I'm saying that because I've seen that happen. If you've been through Aptos Village lately, you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you remember the sleepy little rural feeling village that was there with world famous bicycle jumps that brought people from around the world and became a training ground for people who are now earning their living doing those crazy, amazing jumps. It all was there in Aptos. But what happened when the county wanted to increase their money coming in from the taxes in that area? Lots of things were waived, including a full environmental impact report. If you remember that, what Aptos Village used to look like, and you look at it now, all of that happened under a negative declaration. And there are historic resources there. It is a known state historic archaeological site. No, nothing happening here. They didn't even have to have tribal observers there when they were digging. They didn't. They had a young kid who stood off on the side and looked at his cell phone, and he was getting his degree in paleontology or something like that. And the county let that happen. The county did a cursory traffic study and said, oh, no, there'll be no problem. Those are the kinds of things the county allows when it wants the money. It wants the money. It waived the developer's fees for a park because the developer gave them or was going to offer them a 0.71 acre parcel of a hillside as a park. So that allowed the county to waive the developer park fees that were at the time $750 per bedroom. Waived for Barry Swenson by the county. It allowed the county to give free easement for Barry Swenson to take their pipeline, dig up and destroy the lawn of Aptos Village Park, and dump the parking lot effluent into Aptos Creek for free. For free. And it ended up that the county decided they didn't want that half an acre, that 0.71 acre anyway. And so no park there. And that is a fly in the ointment for the condition of development that said you must have some form of active recreation to replace what you bulldozed with the bike jumps. Nothing. It's an empty lot now. I'd like to see it turned back into a bike jump. And if you feel the same, contact County Supervisor Kim DeSerpa in the 2nd District. She's not convinced. So those kinds of special deals go on when the county is driving the bus. I say let's let the state, in this case, drive the bus with New Leaf Energy. And incidentally, this is not related to the New Leaf markets. New Leaf Energy, and they are just going to be the installer. That's important to know. They are just going to install this project and then hand it over to an operator, which seems likely it could be Sequoia Energy LLC from Canada, but we don't know, and they could flip it anyway. So the thing about this is under an EIR, they have to analyze all biotic factors. College Lake is right there. They have to analyze other hazards, such as the earthquake fault, the seismic fault that is right there. And they have to analyze noise. These battery energy systems in, this would be over 300 metal cargo containers filled with lithium batteries. They're very noisy because they have to be cooled, and they have to have fumes. The fumes that collect within the containers, they have to be ventilated. And what's in those fumes? Well, who knows, huh? And what's just downwind of that? The Diamond Estates subdivision, a very dense blue-collar working subdivision. Next door is the Shapiro Knolls affordable housing complex. But none of that was included in the developer's application with the county. And the county has not deemed their application complete, but they're not making any noise about making them include impacts of this site on those neighboring places. They are not making them do anything. And in fact, in Public Records Act request information, I see that the county is maybe all too happy to let Dudak, the consultant paid by New Leaf Energy, to write a lot of the things that are being done. I have some notes. here that I got in a Public Records Act request, and these are notes from someone's telephone conversation. And it looks like Monica Martinez was there. Ginny Johnson, remember Ginny Johnson is a former aide to Bruce McPherson, and they got this whole 3CE thing going. Both of them are still very actively involved in 3CE. They had a meeting with County Council, and so they talked about how important New Leaf is to 3CE's goals. 3CE has been talking about the talking to New Leaf about how important this would be to them, and but they did not go as far as signing a power purchase agreement as 3CE has done with the Holman BESS LLC for the project down in Moss Landing. They had a talk with Max Christian, and now he's the project developer for New Leaf, and they want a larger project. New Leaf wants to have it all developed within 5 years, and they are a California-focused company. 25% of the statewide purchases are interim, and they're trying to address climate goals. So that's their push. It said that it would not be online until 2029, but they would start building in 2027. The other thing in the notes here, and this is a page that is mostly redacted, but it says that the Central Coast Community Energy is in the process of negotiating a purchase power agreement with HHour to help backfill their, quote, resource adequacy, end quote, requirement that must be fulfilled by the BESS project. The project and the required rezoning will be coming back before the board within the next 6 months. I'm not sure of the date on this. It's a part of the 2/3 redaction of the page. HHour has requested a meeting with Monica Martinez to brief her on the details, which we recommend could happen in mid-February. That would be 2025. The Planning Department has been asked to let the District 5 know about their anticipated process and timeline on creating the zoning overlay to allow the best projects on particular sites, and the Planning Department's review of the HHour project application. Now, this zoning overlay issue is important for the 90 Minto Rd project because it's an apple orchard. Our county has what's called Measure J that was passed by the voters in the 80s that says you cannot take agricultural land out of production. We want to protect and preserve our agricultural land. So guess what the consultant for New Leaf Energy is doing? They're saying, oh, and this is again in Public Records Act information, oh, it's marginal land, it's not productive. And they are redefining the level of productivity of this orchard. It is a productive orchard, and the neighbors around have testified that it has been productive for a very long time and continues to be so. However, since the deal got signed by the current owner, once it's a relative of the owner, once the patriarch passed away, Mr. Lukasich, then the things started happening with 3CE. And the consultant came in and said, oh, that's not very good land. So they're really not doing much to take care of it. But it is still productive farmland. That's what 3CE is supporting. opt out of 3CE. I'm urging you, opt out of 3CE and tell them why. That they're supporting hazardous lithium battery storage in our communities, known to be explosive and toxic, and it is just a matter of time when those fires would happen. We have seen a number of them happen recently. Take a look at the Boulder City, Nevada fire that happened in the end of September. It was a carbon copy, essentially, of what this Seahawk project would be. It caught fire. It was out in the desert. It caught fire, and there were explosions. There are others that have happened. Most recently in Arizona, Glendale, Peoria area, it caught fire and exploded, and there were injuries. There's an excellent video put out by a firefighter trainer. The title is Stacked, with a capital D at the end. STACHE capital D. And look at the most recent one. He has been analyzing these battery energy storage disasters since Moss Landing started in January, that fire. And he looks at things from a firefighter's perspective. The most recent one is the one that has me very concerned, because he analyzes he has one called Not All BESS Battery Energy Storage Systems Are Safe. And in that one he goes into what you and I can do when these projects are moving in. What do we need to be saying? What do we need to be demanding of our public officials to do to keep the public and the environment safe? It's a tough one, but watch that video. And then the most recent one is aimed more toward the fire responders. And this I want you to look at and send it to your local fire agency, because this is a fire that happened in Sacramento, I believe in April, in a car fire. It was at a electric vehicle charging station, and the battery in the car caught fire and exploded, and the toxic fumes were spreading around. And it shows a video of it. It is a very eerie situation, with this fume staying kind of low to the ground. And the firefighters responded to it as a hazmat incident. But the way that the firefighter protocol is, if you are 320 feet away from the incident, it is considered the safe zone. These firefighters, there were 5 of them that were in that space, and so they did not have their breathing apparatus on, and they became ill. One of them, as they were leaving the incident, began vomiting. He was taken to the hospital. His lung capacity, because of what he breathed in that plume, is permanently reduced by 20%. He cannot go back to work. What is his life like now? Others also have experienced permanent lung damage, renal damage, and extreme fatigue. And those are our firefighters. They were supposedly in the safe zone. Now look at that video and pay particular attention to the homes that are near there, that plume was traveling over. What are we doing putting these facilities in our neighborhoods? This was an electric car charging station. I have written Central Fire District Chief Nee about this. There's a big one behind the Burger King on 41st Avenue in Capitola. And the Deputy Fire Marshal, Aaron Collins, wrote back and said that was approved in 2022, and that was under the code, the State Fire Code of 2019, which did not address any of this that we now know is part of the danger, the hazard of lithium-ion batteries. So here's what we've got to do. We've got to be contacting our fire agencies and urging them, demanding them to take action immediately to adopt more protective fire codes regarding these batteries. Not only the big grid ones like the Minto Rd one, there's another one planned for Aptos on Freedom Boulevard by Aptos High School, and another one off of Paul Sweet Road directly behind the Dominican Hospital and Dominican Oaks Retirement Center, and neighborhood all around. What are we doing? How could our Board of Supervisors think this is okay? We've got to be vocal, people. We've got to be very vocal, and we have got to demand that they not do this. If they're going to use lithium, that it's not in the residential areas. There is a big substation up on Empire Grade Road. I don't believe that lithium should be anywhere because of the fire and the explosive and the toxins. But there is a big place up on Empire Grade Road. The key piece is non-lithium, and that's what our leaders need to be focusing on. Non-lithium battery storage actually is available. I have interviewed Mr. John HHour here on my program. He has been coming in from San Francisco to attend some of the Commission on the Environment meetings and testifying. He was one that was not allowed to speak and give information to the Commission and the public about non-lithium battery energy technology and its status. It is happening, and it is available, and it is not flammable. So what are we doing? Allowing the likes of 3CE to push through New Leaf Energy, Sequoia Energy, others who are lining up for other spots in our neighborhoods to put in these dangerous, dangerous lithium-ion battery storage places. Call in if you have some thoughts. 265-5050, and that's in the lovely 831 area code. I'd love to hear what you think. I was going to tell you a little bit more about this opt-in process with the California Energy Commission. If a developer wants to go that route, it does indeed go around local codes and things, but not the fire codes. Not the fire codes. So that's why it's important for us to lean on our fire agencies. They really can drive this bus to protect us and their staff. I can't urge you strongly enough. I can't emphasize this strongly enough. This is very important because once these facilities are built, the lithium batteries have a life of about 4 years. Or less if they're overcharged, undercharged, depending on how they're managed. And once they start wearing out, that's when there are problems with thermal runaway and explosions. I have read the risk assessment report for the HHour project. There will be nobody there to monitor anything because the gas that will be ventilated from the interior of those 300 plus metal cargo containers is carcinogenic, and no person can be there. That's stated right in New Leaf's risk assessment. It will all be monitored remotely. From where? We don't know. What could go wrong? It also says in that risk assessment that if there is a fire, first responders should not get any closer than 100 feet because of explosions, and the metal doors would become projectiles. This cannot happen. We cannot allow lithium storage of any chemistry in our communities. While the nickel manganese cobalt chemistry that blew up and fired up in Moss Landing has the heavy metal toxicity, and we are told by the likes of Senator John Laird that the safer technology now is lithium iron phosphate. Well, it burns too. It has thermal runaway too. And when it does burn, it emits more hydrogen fluoride toxic gas than the other chemistry does. It's not safe either, and we should not accept it. The issue here is money. The issue here is money by the investors who have already invested lots into lithium battery technology, which is a lightweight, quickly chargeable chemistry for cars, cell phones, computers, but for stationary, large, grid-scale energy storage, it is not. It is not appropriate. And others technologies, sodium, vanadium, many other technologies are much better and are coming along. If you look on the Invinity's website, they've got projects that are being installed. They're smaller projects. They're not the 200 megawatt that 3CE wants, but those projects would only have power for 4 hours, and then it's gone. The non-lithium battery technology is longer duration and doesn't have the problem with explosions and thermal runaway. So doesn't that seem like a better idea? Call in. We've got about 10 minutes if you want to talk about this. 831-265-5050. Kind of to wrap back around to the process, if the California Energy Commission were to handle this, they would be required to do a full environmental impact report. They would be required as part of that to do an alternatives analysis, other sites that could be used. And there's some thought that that's why the county has chosen the spot at Aptos and next to Dominican, because they're stupid places. They all are. But next to a high school, next to a hospital, next to a retirement center. So they could say, well, there is no other alternative. Well, there are other places. I submitted a Public Records Act request asking for how the county found or determined those were the places to go. Initially, there was a fourth one up in Scotts Valley. You probably see it as you come in from Highway 17 into the city of Scotts Valley, off on your left there. Huge substation there, and they wanted to put one there, but they had just done their homework so well that, it's in the city limits. We can't gobble that one up. So it's down to these three. But how did they determine that? There is this place up on Empire Grade Road. There's one on Warrenella Road, more remote. You can point to the battery energy fire that happened in August down in Monterey County in Parkfield. That one went up in smoke, but it's so remote. Even with a 2-mile radius evacuation, 18 people were affected. What would happen if Seahawk is built and catches on fire? Look at all those people in the Minto Rd area, in the Diamond Estates area, further down the road, the Amador subdivision, huge subdivisions. And right next to College Lake, where it is now a source of water for the Pajaro Valley Water Management, water reclamation and farming. And on the other side of the lake is the Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds. Where are we told to go in evacuations, so like the CZU fire, the fairgrounds? Where would people go if they were told to evacuate? They couldn't go to the fairgrounds because it would be under the plume of toxic poison from a fire. So who is driving this bus and why are they pushing to lithium? That's the question we've all got to be asking our leaders. And I'm telling you, based on seeing Rob Shaw from 3CE picking our CEO last Monday, that's who's driving the bus. And all of the investors that have invested money in lithium, which is primarily mined in the Congo using child slave labor. Tell me that's green. Tell me that's green. You're listening to Community Matters. I'm your host, Becky Steinbrunner. These are my observations. Don't take my word for it. Go do some research yourself. Talk with your county supervisor and ask them some of these questions that I have posed to you. And demand that they hold a town hall meeting in advance of their planned vote on our new battery energy storage system, BESS, ordinance next month. We've been told it's going to happen next month. So we've all got to be vocal and contact your fire department, and we've all got to link arms and take care of this for the good of the people and our environment. If you have thoughts, feel free to call in 265-5050. That's 831. I've got a few minutes here. The last thing I want to say, two things I want to say about this. Again, opt out of 3CE. These people, they're wolves in sheep's clothing, let me tell you. Opt out. You will not find out on their website how to do it. You've got to enter it in as a search, but have your it's very easy to do. There's a phone number, 877-455-2223. Let me say it again, 1-877-455-2223. Or you can also go online. 3CE, 3cenergy.org. 3cenergy.org. Billing and energy choices /opt-out. Have your current bill number there with you and tell them you want to opt out. You can always go back after a year. But you know what? People who are doing this tell me their power bill went down. It's cheaper. Their power bill went down because 3CE is paying a lot of money to make these power purchase agreements, millions of dollars. They're giving away a lot of incentives for people to switch to electric tractors, all kinds of things. But that's what your bill is paying for, to subsidize those sorts of things and to subsidize 3CE's management support of dangerous lithium-ion battery storage. If you have any thoughts, give me a call. Finally, the last thing I want to let you know on the opt-in certification with the California Energy Commission, they have 270 days to make their decision. So it's not a quick process. So that's why I think Max Christian's leaks to the likes of Lookout Santa Cruz and some of those that are wringing their hands about losing local jurisdiction. It's all a game, people. It's all a game. And it's to put public pressure on our officials to swallow whatever 3CE and the consultant Dudek for that's doing the work for New Leaf Energy. They're even defining for the county planning department what critical infrastructure is. I'm seeing that in the Public Records Act request. And don't take my word for it. File a Public Records Act request with the county. It's easy to do. Harder to get the documents, but they're there. Sometimes they're redacted, but they're there, and see what you get. We can compare notes. That would be fun. So I'm going to just talk a little bit in the last 5 minutes here about a piece of information I learned at Tuesday's County Board of Supervisor meeting that really caught my attention. So listen up. It was a testimony by our wonderful county clerk, Tricia Weber, to the Board of Supervisors that she had just learned there is a new US postal policy that any ballots deposited in a regular mailbox on November 4th, if they are mailed from a spot greater than 50 miles from the nearest regional mail depot, will not be guaranteed a postmark of November 4th because of the rule change. We are more than 50 miles away from Richmond, which is the nearest one. So if you procrastinate and drop your ballot into the mailbox on Tuesday, November 4th, it might be postmarked November 5th and would be declared invalid by the county clerk. So if, and this is what Tricia Weber has suggested, our wonderful, I can't say enough good about her. She is on it, and I trust her. If you are going to mail your ballot anytime later than 1 week before the November 4th election day, you should really take it into the post office and ask for them to hand stamp it with that date. Especially if you go in on November 4th, you must do that. Otherwise, your vote could not count, may not count. There are also many drop boxes around the county that are monitored daily and are emptied daily, and those get taken to the election department. You can find the locations of all of those, and there are a number of them around the county. If you look on the Santa Cruz County votescount.com, I think, votescount.com, maybe it's org, for the Santa Cruz County Elections Department, and you'll find all of those locations. And if you're out and about on November 4th or a couple days leading up to it, there are voting stations where volunteers are actually there, and you can deposit yours there. So I have a call coming in, but I'm not sure if it is my next guest. Hang on, the equipment here will let me know. You're listening to Community Matters. My name is Becky Steinbruner. I am honored to be your host, and I urge you to call in. My next guests for the next hour will be Jess from Rising Worldwide and Barak Laub, and he's calling in now. They'll be talking with us about the film that will be screened for your information and education on October 28th at the Santa Cruz County Resource Center for Nonviolence, illuminating the problem of orphanages being places where sex traffickers go to recruit, children being trafficked. A film coming up, and in the next hour we'll be talking with Barak Laub, the filmmaker on this. Again, that's going to be October 28th here in Santa Cruz to support Rising Worldwide and their wonderful efforts to end child trafficking in Santa Cruz County. It's happening here, folks. It is. Stay tuned. Hello, Barak. Can you hear me? Hello?
Hey,
Hi.
hey, yeah.
Hi,
Sorry, I was
Barak.
muted.
Oh, hello. I am Becky. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Nice to make your acquaintance, Becky.
Likewise. So we have 6 minutes for
Okay.
the recording. Do you have what do you want to? And I think Jess is calling in now too. I'll wait for her to get logged in here. It has to go through a
Sure.
bit of a process. I just can't thank you enough for your time today and everything that you're doing. I'll let
Okay.
Jess
Yeah.
get
Just
logged in.
so you have a little bit of a heads up. Our film doesn't exclusively focus on sex trafficking. It's just child trafficking in general,
Mm.
and how basically orphanages have become a commodity market for children, where they'll get removed from their families through force, fraud, and coercion. Um, but I know a lot of people kind of start to think that it's mainly just a sex trafficking, but that's just a small aspect of it.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Hey, let me get Jess in here. Hello. Hello,
Hi,
Jess.
Becky.
Hi, Jess.
Hi.
Nice to hear you. I've got Barak online here too. Um,
Great.
Hi, Jess.
Hi.
Good. So you can hear each other as well. So we've got about 4 minutes before we go live on the air. I want to ask you. Barak was just saying just that the film is not really focusing on child sex trafficking. It's just children as a commodity for things. So we want to
Right,
make
and there's
that
like,
clear. Go ahead.
go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, please.
I was going to say that it's, part of the reason we're doing the film is to um, sort of expose different areas of trafficking, different forms of trafficking that are often like hidden or unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So this is obviously also to a fundraising effort to be able to fund the Safe and Sound program, which actually does do the work of educating children on how to keep safe, on how to identify, all those things, whether or not they're being forced, fraud, or coerced into labor or sex trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like a full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. What do each of you want to make sure is the message you get out to our audience so we make sure to get that out? Barak, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think it would be great for people to be aware of the screening of the film, and also to know about Rising Worldwide and what it is they do. And also, to be aware of what our website is, and they can visit it and they can view it, and that we are happy to do screenings or educational programs and briefs with individuals and groups and political leaders. I
Great.
think that's kind of the main push, is that, hey, there's opportunities if this is someone cares about, that they can become involved.
Yeah.
And then obviously for us, the main thing is that you shouldn't ever pretty much volunteer in an orphanage.
Thank you. Um, Jess, what's the main thing you want to get out to the people today?
I guess I would say that I want to, make sure to highlight work that Rising is doing. But I think, too, a really good takeaway might be that there's no hierarchy of trauma. I think people think that, like, sex trafficking is the worst thing that could ever exist, and, like, it, in fact, is horrible. But it's equally as horrible to be ripped away from your family and put in an orphanage. It's equally as horrible to, be forced into situations of forced criminality where you're, 15 years old and being forced to, like, drive trucks with drugs in it, and you're the face of, or the target if anything happens, which is strategic on the trafficker's part, right? Like, they want to make sure that they're not going to be held accountable in any way, and that's
Yeah.
why they use
Yeah.
kids. So, like,
Yeah.
panhandling, right? Like, being forced to do all kinds of things, under the threat of violence is horrible in general. And even, like, with labor trafficking survivors, for example, like, a lot of, like, what is used on them in terms of coercion and force is sexual violence. So we're not escaping, any of the sort of things that other people experience as well. You know what I mean? Like, so I guess that's one of the takeaways I think I would like to.
Yeah.
And kind of to double down on what Jess said,
We've got about
we're
15 seconds.
We're working on legislation in the U.S.
Excellent.
and as a whole. But what's really unfortunate is some people are trafficked into this kind of criminal trafficking, either to scam people or, like she's saying, driving trucks full of drugs or whatever it is.
We're going to go live
And
now.
if
We're going
they,
live now.
okay,
Sorry. Hello.
yeah,
Welcome back. Welcome back to Community Matters. We were just involved in a discussion here together. My name is Becky Steinbruner. I'm honored to be your host and honored to have with us here today two incredible people working both with to support keeping our kids safe. And I have with us here Jess, who works with Rising Worldwide, a local nonprofit that assists victims of human trafficking get out safely and heal, and also does a tremendous amount of education in our community to help the youth from getting caught in that web. I also have with me Mr. Barak Laub, who is the filmmaker for what we'll be talking about today. Coming up at the end of this month, an event at the Santa Cruz Center Resource for Nonviolence to view and learn more about how orphanages are not such a good place for many reasons. So I'd like to, without further ado, welcome you both on. Jess, why don't you introduce yourself first, and then you can hand things over to Barak.
Fantastic. Thanks, Becky. I'm really honored to be here as well. My name is Jess Torres. I'm the Director of Programs at Rising Worldwide. I'm also a survivor leader in the anti-trafficking movement, as I am a victim of child trafficking. And I guess I'll leave it at that and hand it to you, Barak.
Thank you.
Hi, Becky. My name is Barak. I'm a filmmaker, and I'm working in the political sphere to create legislative change focused on orphanage tourism and child trafficking, or what is now being known as orphan trafficking.
Yeah. Thank you both for joining me here today, and thank you both for your excellent work. I'd like to, I would like to leave it up to you. I want you to have the floor, really. Do you want to talk about the film first and what it's going to be about?
Sure, how about I'll hop in and I can give you sort of a quick rundown of the film and the issue we're dealing with and what we're doing with Rising Worldwide for a few minutes, and we can go from there.
Yeah,
So
that sounds good. And Jess, you jump in anytime. This program is yours. Thank you.
Thanks.
So, essentially, how this film got made is I went to South Asia with my best friend about 10 years ago, and we wanted to make a Anthony Bourdain for college kids. I'd spent about a year in India before that, so I wanted to go back, and he'd never left the country, and I was going to teach him how to ride a motorcycle and eat food with his hands and cross borders and all that cool stuff. And while we were there, we uncovered this issue, which at the time had not been reported at all. It's now starting to get a fair amount of publicity, of orphan trafficking. And what that is essentially, we now know there's around 5.3 million children in the world who are living in residential care or orphanages. And of those 5.3 million children, over 80% have at least one living parent or a family they could go back to. So we're saying there's around 4 million kids who are living in institutions and residential care, who have parents they could go home to, and even more have an extended family, which is usually how the third world, they have an extended family that would look after the children in real orphan situations. And a quick way to look at this is that in the United States or Canada or Japan or Finland or any global north country, we no longer have orphanages. We've all moved to kinship-based care or foster care, which have issues with them for sure, but they're still far better than, institutionalization of children who aren't being looked after. So why this happens or why this exists now is largely because of the money. There is a lot of money in the orphanage industry. It's been estimated US Christians alone give around $4 billion every year to orphanages and residential care. And that's only 65% of the US population, and not accounting for Europe or other wealthy sort of nations. So we're trying to bring attention to this particular issue, and we've had some really good success, fortunately, getting some attention on that, both in the federal level as well as the state. And now we're really, really excited to be working with Rising Worldwide, who also does a ton in the trafficking sphere, in the trafficking world, to bring a screening to the public, which the money that is raised will go to help combat trafficking. And people will be able to watch the film, and I'll be there to answer questions and explain more. This is, as you are probably learning, and most people are, an incredibly complicated issue, and it can take a bit of time to wrap our heads around. I know it took me a while to understand what was really going on when I was in these countries, and then I've been working on this for about a decade to kind of gain the experience and the knowledge to realize, this is a very complicated situation. It's not something that can be solved with a hammer. It needs to be solved with a scalpel, and it needs to be, a very wide net of people working together and collaborating and gaining knowledge about human trafficking in general, orphan trafficking, which, as I said, is a rather new topic that currently there's no laws against in the United States. And then
Is that
also
right?
the amount of trafficking.
There's no
Yeah,
law
so
against it?
yeah, so that's the issue here, is in the United States, and actually any global northern country, once again, it's not illegal. It's illegal in the countries where it's happening. So in Nepal, Cambodia, Kenya, it's illegal to traffic children who have families, etc. But and this is another one of the terrible situations, for example, is if you wanted to volunteer in an orphanage in, let's say, Kenya, you can go online and pay a couple $1,000s to do it, and they don't require background checks. They don't require you have any kind of training. They don't require that, you're a good person or any of that. You just pay money and you get access to kids because it's a money-making mechanism. And so if you go over there and it turns out the organization you're paying is trafficking these children into labor or sex or just pulling them away from their families, they're not violating US law. And so that is something that, we have a push on this happening now federally, which is incredibly exciting. Congressman Chris Smith out of New Jersey recently proposed HR 4732, which would be the Orphanage Trafficking Prevention and Protection Act. And that would be the first of its kind. And that's super duper exciting. And something that we're working on with Rising Worldwide as well is trying to get similar movement like that made in California. And part of this issue is if we talk about, for example, you're going to go over and you might spend $2,000, let's say, to spend a month volunteering with orphans in Kenya, which isn't a lot of money for us, right? Like $2,000 on the Central Coast might pay rent for a month, if you're in a one bedroom somewhere. So you might think, oh, I'm going to get I'm going to pay $2,000, and for a month I'm going to get room and board, and my money is going to go to help the orphans, etc. But if you put that in like Kenyan money or Nepali money, that's like $100,000.
Wow.
Right. So you're going to pay $100,000 for the opportunity to basically interact with vulnerable children when you have no professional skills, and you're not the only one. There's lots of people willing to do this. People are going to find a way to get you vulnerable children for you to interact with for $100,000 a month.
Oh,
and
my
so that's
goodness.
kind of the issue that we're trying to fight against. And like I said, there are laws against this in places like Kenya and Nepal. But if you once again use the same perspective that these people may have 3, 4, 5 volunteers every month, that's such a ridiculous amount of money in those countries. It's more than enough to bribe police officers or judges and to kind of keep these people out of trouble.
Wow.
That's actually, if I
Yeah,
may just
please.
add a couple of comments. This actually reminds me of the work that Rising is doing on a policy level, on a systemic level, for systems change, because we're working with the child welfare systems to create like a 2-gen approach, which means understanding and addressing the systemic barriers like a family is navigating to access the resources necessary so every parent can understand how to distinctly care and best support their child, which is a shift from what we've been doing previously in child welfare, which is essentially just to remove the child. And so it's just all a big, like a thread that I am noticing around the sort of need and momentum that exists to, instead of remove children from their families, and put them into institutions, which is severely traumatizing, that to instead, work to keep families together on every level, right? Whether it be, deportations, child welfare. This is plain and simple, right? Kids, if their families are, equipped, I mean, they will be successful. I mean, there's instances where the family is not able to care, and that's why these, systems exist. But yeah, it's really interesting that we are moving towards that, and that the greater, public, I would say, like, is understanding the importance and, like, critical need for the shift to occur, to exist.
And kind of touch on that as well. Something that we've kind of come to uncover in this space. Like she mentioned, the goal generally here is reintegration of families, because families should be together, and a lot of times these children are moved into these institutions through force, fraud, and coercion. As I said, it's super complicated, so there are cases where the parents are actually dead, or they may be drug addicts or alcoholics, or they may not have the money to care for the child, etc. And so it is a very complicated issue, as I mentioned from the beginning. That being said, a lot of the times the main cause is a sort of poverty, and that there's so much money going to these institutions that the parents may believe the child is better off, even though they're often not. And we have found that for every dollar that we give to institutionalize a child, that same dollar would have the impact of like $4 or $5 if it was going to the families and helping to support them. So if you just keep that in mind, if you say, oh, well, this child's poor, we're going to give $1,000 a month to help this child in this institution, that same $1,000 a month that you're giving could help 4 or 5 children for that same period if it went towards family care and reintegration.
Yeah, with a
I always
much
thought that was
better
super interesting,
outcome.
where, like, I felt like I was groomed for trafficking by the child welfare system as a former foster kid, because I just always was like, why are they giving them money to take care of me, and not helping my mom? Like, what, my mom literally just needed money. You know what I mean? Like, the alleviation of poverty. We try to give people, like, we try to train them, and, like, as much as, like, we can train people and give them, like, the education they need to take care of their kids. If they don't have money, they're not able to care for their kids.
Yeah.
So we can't just stop at, like, education. We have to talk about the alleviation of poverty as part of the work that we're doing, because otherwise we're not really doing anything, right? And it's weird. Like, I always felt like I was just a paycheck. And so when you are, just a commodity for your whole life, it's very easy to understand why a child would, for many reasons, belonging, protection, coercion, fraud, force, all those things, like, stay in a trafficking situation, because they're already groomed and it's already normalized to be something that people tolerate because they're getting paid.
Yeah.
And something that people use for money. Yeah, to
They-
generate money.
They just view themselves that it is normal, that they are just a commodity. Wow.
Well, one of the things too that you run into is a lot of people who are being trafficked aren't aware they're being trafficked, and they don't
Absolutely.
understand necessarily what trafficking is or how it's happening. So that's one of the issues. Similar, like we're talking about, there's a lot of human trafficking that goes on. And I just want to be clear, I'm not an expert on human trafficking that happens in the United States. I'm an expert on orphan trafficking, which only takes place outside of the country, but that's gotten me exposed to a lot of knowledge of, there's huge human trafficking events that go on. For example, the World Cup is a major human trafficking event.
Which is coming to our area next year.
The vast majority of people who live around this don't know that, and it never crosses their mind. They never consider that this is going on. They just think, oh, this is a huge event, a lot of people are coming, it's a party. But, not only are the people who could be watching and could be aware of what's happening, and they might see someone who's being trafficked and have no idea, unaware of it, sometimes the victims themselves who are being trafficked in these situations don't realize that they are victims of human trafficking.
Mm.
I mean, I'm going to just add to that anti-trafficking frameworks are a systemic legislative criminal legal response to the issue, and so it's very high level thinking and policy speak when we're talking about trafficking. Like, what child understands trafficking, which is why the work that we do in schools are so important, because if you know how to identify, recognize and have the tools to protect yourself and to understand how to get help in a situation like that, with a safe adult, then you're more likely to not be trafficked when you have this understanding of like, oh no, I can recognize that this is that thing that they talked to me about in school, right? There was no school, there was no, training or workshops or any kind of education when I was a child about trafficking. And so I personally thought like, I chose to come to this house. And so I laid my bed, I made my bed, I might as well lie in it. Well, you choosing to go into a home or choosing to, hang out with someone does not mean that you consented to exploitation, right? Like, but we don't know that because we have the shame and guilt and, all these, misunderstandings around, and society like doubles down on that, right? Like, you chose to do do drugs, and so now you're, now you're bad. And so I was thinking like, I chose to come here. I was forced into this, and so there's no escaping. Now I'm stuck, and I took the first step. I decided to come here, and so therefore, it's my fault. And so I have no, and who understands their legal protections, right? Like, who understands that this is like something that is actually victimization, and then there's like the criminal legal system, which thrusts you into, carceral spaces, and so it doubles down on like you're choosing to do this, right? You could, exit if you wanted to, which is not true, right?
Right.
For various reasons. Because there's trauma bonds, because there's force, because there's fear, because people are threatening your family. Like, there's so many reasons why it's not easy to leave a situation, and needing intervention is actually, a key component. But again, like, it's a long road, and so most people, the average person, does not understand what trafficking is because of the media and the ways that they have, made it into like white vans and international issues, and so people don't understand this is happening in our backyard.
It's
right?
happening here.
And that's part of the way. Yeah, absolutely. At the amazing, well, I will rewind a little bit. The reason we're hosting this, and everyone is invited, and I just wanted to give a couple of details where the suggested donation is $25. It's also free. All are welcome. And two, there's a pay it forward. If you want to buy a ticket for somebody else, we can also do that too. And so what you are, beyond, getting an education about this issue, it is also a fundraising event to be able to sustain the work that we do in schools. And I've done a million things, spoken at the White House, gone to the UN, all these like in prestigious things, but my greatest, sorry, there's a helicopter flying over.
That's okay. Thank you.
Sorry, yeah. So my the thing that I love the most and the work that I am most proud of is the work that we do in schools with Rising for Safe and Sound, because not only are children made aware and then like open up about ways that they have felt, targeted, or ways that they have like seen, like suspicious behavior, and all kids are going through, in this digital world, like virtual world, like all kids are being hit up by a predator, right? Like by an adult who is looking to, like my daughter was showing me her Snapchat, and she's like, look at all these messages I have, because her stuff is private, but she has like messages that are sent to her, and it's like, I'll give you $800 to show me your feet. I'll give you hundreds of messages about adults sending her messages about giving her money to reveal like nudes, like, and that's not just my child. That's all children. This is the world that we live in.
Yeah.
And so instead of saying, like, we don't want this to happen and, like, adults shouldn't be doing this, sure, all of that is true. And it's happening. So how are we equipping our children to navigate these situations and educating our adults so they know how to respond? Because oftentimes the response is shame. Like, why is this happening? What are you doing? And it's not a child's fault that someone is, or that they're curious, that they say hello back, that this is like, this engagement is happening. But if they have the tools and the information, they're able to see this and say, yeah, no, this is not cool. And so block it, but before it gets to the level of exploitation.
Yeah. Thank you for your good work. For those of you who are just joining us, welcome. Our guest here in this second hour is Jess from Rising Worldwide, a human trafficking survivor that helps others escape safely from human trafficking and also helps educate our youth to prevent being trafficked. And Mr. Barak Laub, who is the filmmaker, who will be showing his film October 28th at the Santa Cruz Resource Center for Nonviolence in the evening as a fundraiser to help support Rising Worldwide. Jess, thank you for talking with us about that, because it is a very complex thing. I read the Santa Cruz County grand jury report that just came out in June, Human Trafficking in Santa Cruz County. I urge everybody to read that, but I think it just scratched the surface. And you're helping us understand it much better. Maybe we can circle back to that if we have time and if you want to. But I'd also like to hear a little more from Barak about the making of your film and where does all this money go that comes in with these orphanages being essentially money makers for these countries? Where does who's getting all this money? Who's supporting all this? Who's supporting taking children away from their families like that?
So, the unfortunate point of it is that we're supporting people like me and you, well-meaning individuals who want to help children, who don't understand what they're doing are the driving factor. It might be through church trips, it might be gap years before college, it may be after you retire, you want to go back to a country you loved and help because you had such a good experience. The danger here, right, is in the United States, for example, Rising Worldwide is a nonprofit, and you can look them up, and they have to say how much money they got and how much money they spent and where it went. So we have this sort of check and balance for nonprofits in the United States. These orphanages in the third world are often not nonprofits, and often the organizations which are bringing you to the orphanages are also not nonprofits, but then no one's tracking this money. And that's actually one of the signs. A lot of people say there's no such thing as a good orphanage. I don't go that far. I've seen it's better for a kid to be in an orphanage, would say, than thrown out on the street, trafficked, and sex trafficking or forced labor. There are people who are trying to help, but this isn't, once again, regulated at all. And any good orphanage would never let a unqualified volunteer have access to vulnerable children. Would not, they would make all of their records publicly accessible. And the amount of orphanages that do that are very far and few between. There might be a couple out there. I know Buckner International runs these sort of Christian orphanages in South America, and they make all of their records publicly accessible. They don't let people go and volunteer with the kids. There's these sort of safety standards. But I'd say 95% of the places out there, they don't have this sort of access of information. They don't let people know, and people go on these trips thinking they're doing good and positive things, unaware of what they're actually contributing to or what they're actually doing. And that's what we're all about, is bringing this sort of awareness or this idea about what you're doing. For example, if you've ever donated money, right, like whether it's, let's say, a person you see on the street with a sign, if you give them $5, you don't know where that $5 is going to go. You say, I trust that this person is going to do good, with the money. it's the same thing even if you go to an orphanage in a foreign country and someone says, if you give me $1,000, I'm going to use this $1,000 for the children. Like, they can tell you that, and then they can take that $1,000 and buy a brand new motorbike or new sets of clothes or take their friends out to fun places to go. They aren't obliged to do that. And a lot of people believe, because good people tend to have, good beliefs in others. They're kind of naive that way. We tend to believe that the people are going to do what they say.
Mhm.
Or it turns out the vast majority of the time, that's not what's happening. We're just kind of suckers who get conned into believing that we're helping when we're actually contributing to this negative problem.
Wow. How did you uncover this? You said 10 years ago you and a friend were there in, I think it was in East Asia, and you uncovered
Yeah.
this. How did you crack that open?
So, as I said originally, when I went to Nepal, I was trying to do this Anthony Bourdain for college kids, let's travel around and drink beers and ride motorcycles and eat cool food. And when I was in India the first time, I worked as a as a stable boy and a gardener in South Asia. And I just volunteered. I found this kind of cool farm, and I said, if I work here, will you give me, room and board? And they said, absolutely. And so I did that for a couple months, and it was a cool experience. But I met people, who would spend $1,000 to come over and do organic farming, or thousands of dollars as part of a program. And I thought, like, well, that's silly. Like, I'm doing exactly what they're doing for free. I'm doing permaculture and I'm learning. I didn't pay thousands of dollars to be here, and I wanted to show in the film that we were trying to make, or in the kind of this travel log, that you could go over and you don't have to spend a lot of money to volunteer somewhere. And someone said, oh, you got to talk to this lady. She has a crazy story. And I said, well, what's the story? And they said, well, she was in an orphanage, but I don't want to tell you. And we've met lots of people who volunteered in orphanages at this point, but they said, I don't want to tell you, it's her story. So we get there, and this woman was in an orphanage, and she was volunteering. I want to say she was in her late 60s, early 70s. She was retired. And a very smart person, hardworking. She wasn't, like, we often think this is all naive 18-year-olds. That's not the case. But so she had gone through a program in Australia to help. She wanted to contribute in Nepal because she'd been there before and she really loved it. And they said, we have this great orphanage and you can use your skills and you can help contribute to the children. And she actually tried to work for a women's program, but they didn't have any available. So she said, okay, I'm going to go to this orphanage. And while she was in this orphanage, the orphanage director was arrested for child trafficking. And she came to find out that all of these children were trafficked, that they had families, mothers, fathers, that they didn't want to be in this orphanage, that the guy was making money and threatening that if they said anything, they would be beaten or they could be sold. And she was kind of crying and broken down. Oh, and then she found out that what she was doing was illegal, that she couldn't legally be volunteering in an orphanage in Nepal, so she was breaking the law. And so she was really upset about this, and she's actually in the film. And, my initial thought was like, wow, you chose the wrong orphanage. There's hundreds of orphanages around here, and you chose the one bad one. All these other orphanages are fine, because I think, going back to being naive, if you're a good person, you don't think people are opening orphanages to traffic children, right? You think they're trying to help people. And as we started diving into this and working with NGOs and people in the Nepali government, we came to realize, like, oh, like, she wasn't in the one bad orphanage. Like, this is systemic of the entire orphanage industry, and just nobody knows about it.
Wow.
Everyone is very unaware. And so since then, we started working on it. And kind of we changed the focus of the documentary from riding around on motorcycles having fun to, this is what's going on, let's bring attention to it, let's get people to stop volunteering in orphanages, let's get wealthy countries to begin taking action where we're not sending our citizens over to contribute to child trafficking, that sort of thing.
Wow. That's how it began, and and you've been working on this film ever since. How long ago did you complete the film?
No, so it's interesting because I thought I was going to come home, and I'd worked on public access television before, and I thought I can do all the editing and put it all together myself, and I'm going to put it on public access television, and this is going to, like, blow everybody's minds. Like, you're going to hear about this, and then it's going to take off like wildfire, and it'll go viral, and we're going to stop orphan trafficking tomorrow. And needless to say, that didn't happen, right? So the film probably came out initially, I want to say 2018-ish, 2019, something like that. And it got some small acclaim in Hawaii where I put it on public access television, but nothing really, no one cared. It's just another thing that's happening where people say, oh, yeah, that's terrible, and they move on with their life. Since then, we got an editor who was really amazing, a guy named David Polsdorfer, who works for uh, major networks out east, and he was volunteering his time. And then in 2023, we released a version of it, and then we released a slightly newer version when we got, we got a proclamation in the city of Carmel, which was the first city in the United States to make a proclamation against orphan trafficking, and then one
Wow.
from Marina, and we're hoping to get one from Santa Cruz, and more places to call upon the state to take action. And to now, where just last month I was in Washington, D.C., meeting with congressmen and senators, trying to convince them to support this bill that I mentioned earlier that was proposed. So we're making huge progress. I mean, this is, I hate to say like we're winning, but we're winning. We're making progress on an issue that no one was talking about or dealing with. But it takes more than a village. It takes groups like Rising Worldwide to say we want to put on a screening and bring attention to this. It takes individuals to say, oh wow, this is something I care about. I need to talk to people about. I need to write my congressman, or I need to write my state assembly member a letter to have them do something. Otherwise, this is going to keep happening. And I think that's what I find so unbelievably troubling is, it's a nonpartisan issue. There's no one on the other side of this, right? It's not like Republicans are one way and Democrats are another. No one's arguing that orphan trafficking is a good thing. That being said, there's just not enough people clamoring about it to get our elected officials currently to do anything. And so as long as that's the case, it's going to remain legal, right? And so we have a great law in California. It's called AB 506. And what that does is if I want to volunteer with children in California, I have to get a background check and mandated reporter training. That just seems like common sense. If I was going to go down and I said, hey, I want to teach these, 5-year-olds how to play soccer, they're going to say, okay, like you need to get a background check so we can make sure you're not a criminal. You need to do some basic training to make sure you understand how to deal with children and warning signs to see, et cetera. It makes a ton of sense. But as of today, it is completely legal for a convicted sex offender from California or any state in the United States to pay thousands of dollars to gain access to vulnerable children in an orphanage and fly over there.
Wow.
That has to be stopped. And the only way that's going to become illegal is if the government takes action. Obviously, everyone you talk to is going to say that's really terrible, but we need the government to step in and say, we're not going to allow that, right? Just because it's not happening on California shores doesn't mean it's okay happening somewhere else.
Yeah.
So obviously we're trying to bring awareness to the issue also for the well-meaning people who almost everybody I know has met somebody who's gone and volunteered in an orphanage and it never occurred to them that this might be a bad idea.
Yeah.
But bringing awareness to these people so they start to look at it and say, oh man, these are good questions, right? Why did I get unrestricted access to children? How come they took somebody without this training and experience? Where was my money really going? So these are kind of our main goals here.
Wow. Yes. Thank you.
If
Go
I may
ahead,
jump
Jess.
in,
Yes, please.
thanks, Becky. I just wanted to applaud the work that Barak's doing because it's really understanding like the key interconnections within, a system and between systems, and like the work of like engaging different perspectives and committing to like constant learning and adaptation and accountability. Because one of the things that we talked about before we started this interview was like the key takeaways we want people to sort of leave with. And for me, it's this, concept that there's no hierarchy of trauma, right? It's being taken away from your family and put in a horrible institution, whether it be in Nepal or United States, is traumatizing and horrific. And being labor trafficked or put into working like existing in working conditions that are life threatening, just bad for your health. We're often too within labor trafficking situations. Part of the force, is sexual violence. To keep you submissive and dominated, and to exert power and control, because that is, how folks exist in trafficking situations under the threat of violence, making children. I have a friend who was trafficked, came to the United States, was trafficked for 2 years, where he did not see the sunlight in a tire shop, and was living in the tire shop, like sleeping on the floor. And then he ran away to a restaurant who said, yeah, we'll help you. And then started forcing him to drive. All you have to do is drive these trucks back and forth. And then he was arrested at 15 for driving without a license and having a ton of cocaine in the vehicle, which he had no idea about because it was in the trunk, right? And he went to jail. Because that's strategic on the task force part, is that, if anyone goes down, they have their hands are free and clear of everything. And the child or the person that they're trafficking is the person who takes the fall, essentially, because they're strategically using this person to be the face of the situation, and if anything goes down, it's going to be on them.
They're the shield. They're the shield.
Yeah, they're absolutely the shield. And so just saying, like, another point around sex trafficking is that our current models, and this is why Rising wants to do this series, informational series, is because there's so many forms of trafficking that are known, or just like details that we don't understand. And one of those things is the hyperfixation on girls and like these sensationalized tropes. And what I mean by that is that our current models are largely built on this like dominant narrative that young girls are being beaten into submission by pimps who groom them and manipulate them into compliance, through force, fraud, and coercion, and isolation and trauma bonds, and that they're raped 100 times a day. And this is absolutely valid and true. Like, this is a true reality for many people who have or are experiencing trafficking. However, it's also critical to name that while this is the most commonly platform experience, like recounted by politicians in the media, it's not the universal or even the most prevalent form of child trafficking. Labor trafficking is actually the most common. A study by John Jay College found that 31 to 71% of youth impacted by commercial sexual exploitation are boys, and we never talk about them. There's like 2 beds for males in the entire United States, in shelters. How are they supposed to get help if there are no resources? We're not talking about them. We don't even name them in the conversation, right? And most of those boys, only 10% of those young men have PIPs. So we're essentially like searching for a bad guy that doesn't exist, right? Where were the push and pull factors there? That was like societal. We created the vulnerability. We created all these systemic failures that pushed them into. Those were the push and pull factors, right? And to summarize this, I guess, or actually, let me name too the fact that, excuse me, like centering the experiences of all youth is like what's important, because the people who are left behind are youth in the sex trade are like significant number of youth in the sex trade are runaway or homeless, and a national study says that 40% of the 1.6 million in-house youth in the U.S. they're LGBTQ.
Wow.
And so most of them, and in California, there's only, I think there's almost 98,000 youth that are experiencing homelessness. Yet there's only 5,000 or 6,000 shelter beds for children, and 1,600 dedicated youth housing units. So how are what I'm saying? Like, this is another component where it's like, what resources are creating, what policies are being instituted that are understanding of these components, because we're always just like criminalizing, and that for trans youth, trading sex is often a necessary survival strategy. Like, what drives the sex trade for them isn't force, fraud, or coercion. It's the need for food, housing, clothing, medication, gender affirming care, living wage employment. So if people had access to like all these things, and like legal pathways, immigration pathways, mental and physical health care, dignified work, and the demand would shrink, right? So I just, like I said, to conclude like this whole rant that I'm on.
No, thank you, Jess. Thank you.
I was going to say that, I personally believe that like the end demand policy is a bit flawed, because what we need to end is supply, not demand. Supply and demand are economic policies for the cost of services, right? And so the demand reduction approach to anti-trafficking work for the last 20 years has only exacerbated trafficking in persons, because economic policies in the U.S. have reduced wages, increase in stable housing, exacerbated healthcare concerns, exacerbated access to resources, only increasing the supply of marginalized people susceptible to being trafficked. So increasing supply while decreasing demand only means that the cost of services, in this case trafficked people, gets lower, right? That's all we're doing with that. And in order to end trafficking, we need to change our economic policies to reduce the supply of systemically marginalized and dehumanized people. And this will lower the number of potential trafficking victims, right? Because people aren't just like, there's so much money in this and this is great, or like, and some people do that, and that's a different, because not all, sex workers are the same, not all people in the sex trade are the same, but, people in the sex trade are there through something called the spectrum of agency, and what that means is, like, usually it's because, one, it's their choice, two, it's their circumstances, or three, it's coercion. So, in all aspects of the spectrum, creating access to things that we need, and that would support these youth, is the answer, right?
Yeah, thank you. I was looking, doing a bit of research before the program today, and saw that in Watsonville, a man was, 35-year-old man was sentenced to 25 years in prison for this very thing, sex trafficking of youth. And he would sell them drugs. He would give them drugs in exchange for them doing things. And that's how they got roped in. And they came in mostly through Snapchat. It was his platform. Yep. I also saw, and I want to give a shout out right here to Santa Cruz County DA for prosecuting this. It isn't very often that prosecutions happen. It's very hard on the victims, but and takes a long time. But that's also got to happen, the prosecutions. I was reading that California leads the nation in trafficking victims. Do either of you want to talk about that?
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure about that, but we are the most populous state. So that does make sense from that direction.
Uh-huh. So I really want people to understand that this is all happening right here in our backyards. It is happening here in Santa Cruz. And Jess, you are probably
mostly... I can tell you, too, how many disclosures we get at these youth workshops in high schools and middle schools.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to shift a little bit to talk about the grand jury report, because I think that it was like super well done, and what the biggest, sort of success or thing to celebrate about what this report, what transpired after this report is not only are systems doing a better job of, for example, collaborating, and even for our multidisciplinary action teams, which is like all service providers that are engaged in helping youth and child welfare who are at risk of, who are being trafficked or are at risk of being trafficked, all come together and talk about different cases or talk about ways that they can prevent trafficking from happening. And that wasn't necessarily happening as frequent as we wanted it to be. And so that sort of pushed people to, action. But even more importantly, is that people are now talking about this issue in Santa Cruz.
Good.
Like before this, we didn't get calls about, what the heck is going on here. We didn't get those calls. And now we are. So It's engaging people into really understanding this issue. And I will say, that anytime you want to, you're looking for gaps, you're going to find them. And so and that's critical work, right? We need to know where we're failing, where we're not meeting, the moment. And that's completely valid. But I did also want to say that Santa Cruz is doing good work. There's much more that can be done. But Santa Cruz is actually one of the only cities that has implemented, Santa Cruz and Monterey County, that has implemented this education prevention education in schools. We have tried to be, try to expand into other counties, and it's not happening. It's not funded. It's not a priority. And this is insane because you can't stop trafficking after it's happened. It's happening. So the best intervention is prevention. Santa Cruz has been doing this for the past, over 10 years, I believe. And so we are one of the people who have really, one of the spaces that have really come, are pioneering sort of what this work needs to look like, what these interventions and initiatives and, programming and policies need to look like. So that's, kudos to Santa Cruz because we, are leading this, this work, our leaders in this work. But, of course, there's so much more that can be done.
I'm hoping that the response is equal in South County. And I don't know if you can talk about that, but I often hear at Board of Supervisor meetings that the resources get shifted a lot more to North County than it goes to South County. And I'm really hoping that the Pajaro Valley School District will also start asking, or if they haven't already, ask for the student and staff training from Rising Worldwide, safe and sound.
Yeah, I wanted to name one of our wins. One time we, because we were working with the school collaborating with the school very intentionally and very frequently, an alternative school in South County, there was a child who was being trafficked, and she was not showing up for her classes, and they were just going to, remove her from the program, close her out, and essentially create push out, right? And when you have school push out, you're already creating a vulnerability because if you're not at school, where are you, right? And so, because of the training that the staff received, once it was made clear that this was, the situation at hand, they completely created this individualized approach to working with this child because they knew that the answer was not to abandon them, right? That actually schools could be, a space where kids felt safe and understood how to navigate healthy relationships with healthy adults, and what it looked like for someone to care for you and understand you versus just punish you, right? For your own victimization, essentially.
And something I want to say as well, I think is really important besides, obviously, we're doing this training the 28th of October. If you're listening at the Center for Nonviolence in Santa Cruz, and go to risingworldwide.com. But what's really important about these educational programs, like things that Rising Worldwide is doing, isn't necessarily just the kids, while that is really important, but it's also the teachers. And so people are aware not just for themselves, but the trafficking that's happening to other people around them. I have had the unfortunate experience of talking to a fair amount of trafficking victims through multiple kinds of trafficking, sex, labor, honor trafficking, etc., where they were being trafficked and attending school, and no one knew that they were being trafficked, or if they did, they didn't say anything. So these are, girls and boys who are being trafficked and abused, and on a daily basis they're attending classes, but because there was no training, their fellow students didn't know what was happening and didn't know who to report it to, and the teachers often didn't know until years and years later, when they were able to come back and talk to them and they'd say, oh my God, I had no idea. I just thought this was a cultural difference, or I just thought, the person wasn't paying attention in class. And that's part of why these educational programs are so important, is these victims, like you said, it's happening here, it's happening all around us. The problem is most people don't see that it's happening, and it's not something you're going to figure out from a 3-minute YouTube video. This is something that you need to have a level of training and an education to start to look for the signs, and then if you do see it, to know who to report it to.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to add to that we also, the part of the work that is critical here too is engaging parents. Because across, whether it be, and also I was going to say that the students are so fantastic because that's part of the curriculum is to understand how to help someone who is being trafficked, because we're not going to save them. We're not going to be the savior, and it's a complex process to safely remove yourself or exit, this situation. So we really create the understanding that everyone needs: students, parents, teachers, faculty, so they're able to understand that this is a situation. Because most people like sort of gut thought is, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this, right? Mm-hmm. And that's victim blaming, because what they don't understand is like kids aren't doing anything. Something is happening to them, mm-hmm. right? And that's what trauma-informed care understands, is that this is not something that they're choosing, and that it's something that they don't know how to navigate. And this is the sort of insidious part of violence, is that it thrives in secrecy, because we've created this horrible, cultural response of blaming people for being victimized, yeah. And so it's really, really important that that shame and stigma is, sort of crushed, right? And no longer exists, because, and it usually doesn't after people understand the context and the complexity of what's happening to a child. So that's been part of our work too, is to create people that safe spaces and create communication, lines of communication where shame is not present, right? And that's critical, because that's why kids don't say anything.
Thank you. We are down to about the last 2 minutes of the program. I want to thank you both. And I would also like to give you the last few minutes here on our program. Tell us how we can learn more about Rising Worldwide and how we can get a ticket for the October 28th film screening and anything else that you want to fit in. Jess, why don't you go first?
Sure, I'll just be brief. I just want to thank you, Becky, for creating this platform for us. The more we can talk about this, the more people, truly understand the issue. So please, you're all invited, as I said before, to share this, share in this amazing screening. Tickets are available at risingworldwide.org. And again, it's free, suggested $25 donation, pay it forward, all those things. So it is accessible to absolutely everyone, and no one. The priority is being there, right? And yeah. The best part of how this is concluding is that Barak, myself, and the amazing Assemblymember Gail Pellerin will be on a panel to sort of further discuss the film and the work that Rising is doing, and also we will have some amazing, things that Rising, some amazing products or offerings that Rising's fair trade program, which is another element which you didn't discuss in terms of all our programming, but that helps, it's Survivor made in various countries, and sold by survivors here in Santa Cruz. So it's this really great economic development program that also supports survivors locally and globally. So feel free to stay for the film, stay for the panel, shop, and just learn more. Also go to risingworldwide.org to know more about our work and ways that you can contribute, and just come to our events. Engage with us, be in community with us, because that's the best way to tackle this issue, is that if we're all, we're all stronger together. So
yeah.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you. We are actually off the air now, and I would like to have you both back on in the near future if that works out for your schedule, because we have a lot more we can talk about. We can talk about the series too. So I'm sorry, Barak, we didn't have time to let you finish off, but I want to really thank you for your good work, and I'll see you on October 28th.
That sounds
Yay.
great. And Jess, I did want to try and connect with you. I don't know if you'd have time for a phone call or something. I'd love to set up some sort of collaborative goal or something like that with the film series that we're doing, like how I did the one with Freedom United. If you'd be interested or you have any ideas. My main one was trying to expand AB 506 and, maybe getting Gail
That would
Feller
be
in to
great.
champion it and do, educational things, briefings for people in the California Assembly. But
I've got to
That would
interrupt
be
you.
fantastic. We've already done that work with her before, so it would be something that like I'm
That
sure
would
she
be
would
great.
open to.
I have to interrupt. The next host is anxious to get in and get set up. So I will.
Okay.
I really want to thank you. Thank you both, and I'll look forward to meeting you.
thank you very much.
care.
All right.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Becky, how's it going? Get your copy made.